One of the most effective ways to help students succeed is through focused, individualized attention. But with only so many hours in the day, teachers are sometimes forced to make tough choices. So, what if emerging technologies could actually enhance those connections, helping teachers and students engage in deeper, more meaningful ways?
Connecting with a student and giving them that light bulb going on over their head. And so giving teachers more of that. And that's the biggest 101 level problem that AI can go to work and do.
On this episode, we're joined by an expert in artificial intelligence and education to explore how this powerful new tool could positively reshape how teachers teach and how students learn. This is Defending Ideas. Defending Ideas is a weekly podcast produced by Sutherland Institute. On this show, we are committed to renewing the principles of common sense conservatism, making you a better champion of sound ideas. Welcome back to another episode of Defending Ideas. I'm your host, Nic Dunn, and this week we're talking about education, but with a little bit of a twist, because we're talking about artificial intelligence again, specifically in the realm of education policy. To have this conversation, I'm pleased to be joined in our studio by Caleb Hicks. He's the founder and CEO of SchoolAI. Caleb, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here.
And joining in our virtual studio is Cooke, Fairbanks, of course, our Sutherland Education Policy Fellow. Christine, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Nick.
So I'm excited to talk to you both because we've been doing kind of this unofficial mini-series, if you will, about AI through the lens of various policy areas. And today, of course, talking about education. And Caleb, I'm really excited to get your thoughts because we'll get into kind of what SchoolAI is, what you guys do, trying to really make a difference in the space. First, can you tell us briefly about you and then about SchoolAI so our audience kind of knows why you were involved in this issue to begin with?
Sure. So Caleb Hicks, I've been working in education my entire career. I was a classroom teacher here in Utah. I taught a teen entrepreneurship class for a number of years. The grade in that class, by the way, was you had to make $1,000 during the semester. So it's just very practical, hands-on. And the motivation behind that is how do you get every student involved in hands-on on the thing that you are teaching? And so lots of really great stories there. But an important thing that most people don't realize about teachers, especially middle school teachers, I was teaching 7 or 8 periods a day, and I had 42 desks in my classroom. So you start doing the math, and I was working with upwards of 300 kids every day. And when you're working with that many people, you have to make a choice every day. Are you working with the most advanced, excited, engaged 20 to 30 kids and giving them what they deserve? Or are you working with the struggling, least engaged 20 to 30 kids and getting them what they deserve? Or are you working with the 80% of kids that also deserve a great experience in moving through? So I've always taken an approach to instructional design and classroom experience design for how do you hit great experiences for all of those kids? And I go into that level of depth on my classroom experience to say that's the promise of AI in the classroom, is that you can actually use it to reach every kid every day. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. The rest about me that's relevant to the conversation. So I've been a school leader. I've been involved in adult alternative higher education. Many of the computer science, many of the software developers here in the state of Utah have gone through programs that I've created or been involved in. With Dev Mountain and with a company called Lambda School. I was at Apple for a couple of years running an education team. And then most relevant to what we're building today is my last company, Lambda School, which was a computer science education that was free for students until they got a job. And you can imagine, because of the incentive structure there, we had to make sure that students really had a great experience so that they stayed with us the whole time. We also had to make sure that every skill that we taught, they nailed so that they could actually go out and get a job. So the level of understanding and reaction that we had to have for how students were doing every day was really high. And we built a lot of technology there. And we also threw a lot of people at making sure that students, again, had a great experience and great outcomes.
Caleb, there's something you mentioned there that I want to pinpoint when you're talking, and I think this feeds into probably sort of the creation of SchoolAI,
Yeah.
why you guys exist, why you do what you do. But you mentioned that when you're a teacher, using AI can help you. I wrote down, you can reach every kid every day. And it reminds me of something on a previous episode we talked with Brent Arell from American Enterprise Institute about AI kind of in the workplace generally. And he described it as, if leveraged properly, it's essentially a way to kind of supercharge our brains.
Yeah.
So that's what made me think of when you're saying teachers or educators being able to, this sort of promise that you can reach every child every day. That seems like it'd be hugely impactful to teachers. That I assume ties into your work with SchoolAI.
Yeah, absolutely. So with SchoolAI, we work on two different angles. We build, if you zoom out, what we say is we're making school awesome for students and the people who support them. That includes their teachers, their parents, their families, school leaders, by finding out what they need and helping make it happen. And so we call it classroom experience management, or a classroom experience platform. And there's two parts to that. There's tools for teachers that help them save time so that they can be more present in the classroom. And then the other is managed, safe, curated AI experiences that teachers can give to their students. That might be tutors, games, kind of magic school bus type activities, and that the students love to do. And when a teacher chooses to use SchoolAI with their students, every student gets their own AI interaction, but the feedback that the student is getting from there rolls up to the teacher so that the teacher knows, hey, this kid needs me today, or these 4 students need help on this concept that I taught 2 days ago, but didn't review today, and everyone else is fine, so they can keep going, but these 4 students need this review. And again, starting to fulfill that promise of AI for personalizing and reaching every kid every day.
Christine, I want to ask you, because one of the things we've talked about in the broad work that you've done on education policy, I know at times the issue of sort of teacher stress or teacher burnout has come up whenever we're looking at reforming what happens in the classroom in any way here in the state of Utah. Can you give any insights to, I mean, this kind of thing, again, it sounds like it would tie in very well to the recognition that teaching is hard, at times taxing for teachers, but yet it's incredibly, incredibly important. Can you just kind of give a lay of the land, the ability of teachers being able to engage with their students individually, or have some kind of that direct individual engagement? That seems to be something we seek after often in our education policy conversations. Can you kind of give a sense of that? And is AI maybe a way to help accomplish that?
Sure. I think the short answer is yes. I mean, one of the big complaints with the teacher profession, we often go to like the pay and things like that, which is important. But over time, just the administrative load of being a teacher it has just become enormous, such that it takes away from kind of like the human-to-human interaction that I think a lot of people find attractive about teaching and wanted to get into in the first place. So whether or not it's, helping to cut down on hours spent grading. I used to be an English teacher. Reading essays is very time intensive, or creating rubrics, or understanding student outcome data and what it means for that student, whether they're at risk and things like that. Creating assessments, creating lesson plans. Caleb was talking about helping the different students at these different, levels of, I guess, proficiency. You can help them where they're at, and create differentiated learning experiences. So, I mean, I think the potential is massive for teachers. I think some of the questions that people have maybe are a little bit more around like the students, but I think as long as we're willing to harness this, I think it could help with that administrative burden that teachers are really feeling these days.
And Caleb, that's one of the things that's been on my mind coming into this, is what either you through your work with SchoolAI, or kind of the inclusion of AI in education, generally speaking, can you elaborate a little more on the problems that we want to try and solve? How is this technology helping us? And I kind of wrote down the two of, time-saving tools for teachers and then these resources for students. But can you give us some additional examples of what specific problems or challenges in education for teachers or students can AI help to address?
Yeah. The biggest one we think of it as a 101 problem is the teacher time. Teachers are so overloaded with administrative work, with content preparation, with content differentiation. How do you make this relevant for these kids and these kids and these kids? And it's impossible for a teacher to finish work for the day. There's contract time. They show up to school at a certain time and they leave at a certain time. They'd never finish. And that becomes really hard as a professional. We put so much on teachers from an expectation, like a social expectation that we have for teachers, that is like, you are caring for my kids. And teachers feel that weight, but they also feel like, oh, I have to do all of this busy work to even show up and get paid and keep my job. And but as mentioned, is like, teachers get into the profession to work with students, to have what we call like light bulb moments or aha moments. And my favorite times teaching, it wasn't when I was delivering the right lesson or the presentation I prepared. It was connecting with a student and giving them like that light bulb going on over their head. And so giving teachers more of that. And that's the biggest like 101 level problem that AI can go to work and do. When you start thinking about the student side, there's a constellation of problems and challenges and opportunities. You mentioned that you were an English teacher. Grading essays is crazy. I actually have an essay from my junior year. I remember doing the math one day. My teacher has 200 students. This is a 5-page essay. I know he assigned the same essay to every student. There's no way he's going to read this. He's going to read the first paragraph, the last paragraph, and that's it. And I have a paragraph in the middle of the essay that says, I don't think you're going to read this. I got an A on this paper. And it's like, that's not because the teacher did anything wrong, but it also meant that my writing was not getting any feedback whatsoever. I got more feedback on my writing in the 1 hour that my dad helped me on a college admissions essay than I got throughout all of high school. And so actually giving students feedback to get better, actually giving them a platform where they can engage and get a response on something they care about. Let me switch gears a little bit on a different way that we reach students every day. Less than 25% of kids, high schoolers, say that they have a one-on-one conversation with an adult in a given week. That isn't at school, that includes at home. So when you start thinking about a student going to school, interacting with friends, which is kind of performative when you're in high school, like you feel like you have to show up a certain way to not get made fun of, or so you have that lens. And then your interactions with teachers are usually like one-to-many, or you're in trouble. And then you're not really talking or connecting with your family at home. You're really isolated. And what I'm about to say is complicated. I'm not saying this is easy, but when you can say something to an AI, to a chatbot of any kind, and it responds to you in a non-judgmental way, you suddenly feel very comfortable sharing how you're doing, what you're working on, what you care about, your aspirations in the world. And what we feel like you can do with that is you can start to solve some of these self-isolation things that is really that a lot of kids are really struggling with, and do it in a way that gets them back out talking with humans, right? Like talking with people, talking with their friends, their family, their teachers, their parents at home in ways that actually drive meaning and connection that right now so many teenagers don't actually feel. And I bring that up as just like, most people wouldn't think of that when they think about AI in the classroom or students using AI. And again, I won't pretend that that's like, there's complexity in that. And I think that's an important part of the work that we're doing with SchoolAI, is understanding the right ways to engage with students in using these tools.
That actually brings up a good point, because I can see I can see some of the critics or the skeptics of this kind of technology, in some ways echoing some of the same criticisms I remember in years past in education policy conversations. That now that we have Chromebooks and iPads and everything, just sort of putting a device in all these kids' hands is not necessarily the answer. And I'm imagining those same skeptics might say now, like, well, hang on, you're saying you want more human interaction, but then kids are talking to a chatbot. Help to kind of, I guess, rebut those folks, connect the dots, so to speak, that no, these tools, ultimately, the ultimate goal is actually to increase that quality human interaction. In this case, I like the way you described it with kids and having any one-on-one interaction with an adult as being a healthy thing.
Yeah.
We want to find efficiencies so that can happen more often. How do we do that?
A lot of teachers will do something that's called a bell ringer at the beginning of class. It's kind of like between classes, you come in and what do you do right as class is starting? Or they'll do something called an exit ticket, which is just like a quick, it's sometimes like a quiz or a reflection or like something that went well. It's a nice structured way to start class or end class. And one of the very popular ways that people are using SchoolAI today is to say, hey, I want to do a bell ringer where students come in and for the first 5 to 7 minutes while I'm transitioning from the last class, while they're getting ready, it's just going to review what they did and know about before class, what they want to know about, and what they're going to learn. And so it might be the equivalent of us reading a textbook at home before coming to class, where it might show a video or it might, and it's going to chat about that video. And that's already something that students are doing, we were reading textbooks and they're chatting with AI that's referencing the same content. But what that gives the teacher is it gives them a real-time dashboard of how every student is doing, red, yellow, green, and why. On SchoolAI, they get, here's every student, here's a headline, if there's something important for me to know about how that student is doing. And then I'm getting a Twitter-style feed of insights. This student is struggling with this concept. This student is coming to school hungry. This student mentioned like they just got bullied in their last class, and so they're in no state of mind to be learning in this class, right? And it isn't every day that every student is bringing one of those issues, but that's the point, is that every student's getting their own interaction, and the teacher is getting the insights into the right things for them to zero in on. And we think of it almost as a GPS for how the teacher can spend their 15 minutes of flexible time during class to go and work with the right 5 students today.
So it does lead into kind of the overall purpose of SchoolAI, just to get a sense of the work you guys are doing. Is it mostly teacher focused, or is it mostly student focused, or a little bit of both?
I would say the answer is it's mostly student focused. Today, everything goes through the teacher, right? The teachers are the ones curating the classroom experience. They're the ones saying, this is what my students can and can't do. They're the ones saying, this is what I want AI to do with these students, and this is what I don't want it to do with students. So we started with Jordan School District here in Utah was our first partner. They actually are one of in the entire country, they are on the leading edge of using AI, first with teachers and then with students. They were actually recognized by the International Association for EdTech, Education Technology, for their working with students. And I'll tell you, the first thing that we built for them was an AI chatbot that a teacher could say, I want you to be a writing coach. I do not want you to write the essay. And so it's all guardrailed and managed and supervised by the teacher, but it is for the students. And there's lots of people building AI for teachers. I called it like the 101 use case. We have that too. If you're a teacher and you need a lesson plan, you need something that aligns with your state standards, you need something, right? We do that, but it gets really special when you create that feedback loop by putting it in students' hands.
This is really, really amazing. I feel like this with this issue, the same way I have with some of our previous conversations about AI, that it seems like there's just so much. And I mentioned to you before we started recording, and I mentioned to others that I'm very much in a position of I get that AI is really important. I'm still sort of learning how and why in each of these respective fields. And so I think there's definitely a sense of excitement, enthusiasm, and kind of wonder at this new emerging technology. I also recognize at times there are questions, there are concerns. And for that, Christine, I do want to shift gears a little bit and talk for a minute about kind of the policy lens. A lot of folks are still trying to figure out how they feel about this new technology, broadly speaking, as well as in the education field. And I'd love your thoughts on kind of what's been the policy response to AI in education, generally speaking, either at the federal level or here in Utah. What's kind of the footing, if you will, of those in the public policy space with how to address this new technology?
Yeah, so as with anything, especially technology, when it's new, there's excitement and then a lot of concerns and then a lot of practical questions like, what does this look like? I think what policymakers are realizing now is that it's already here and it has been for a while. And that's typical, right? Policy is usually a step behind what's in the real world and they're responding. So I do think Utah is, particularly excited and warm towards AI. Maybe it's the tech landscape in the state, but, there's an Office of AI Policy. Governor Cox last month, took a bunch of Utah leaders to learn more about an AI hub. So I think that there's momentum and energy there. But when it comes to education specifically, the Utah State Board of Education has an AI specialist. Last year, they published a 14-page document on artificial intelligence. It's a framework, and it's not regulatory in the sense that it's very prescriptive, but it goes over like guiding principles, responsible uses, prohibited uses. So it's kind of a starting place to kind of land, especially as districts are thinking through this. And then in the higher ed space, there's been some public-private partnerships and things that have been really public about getting AI skills to students. So I think there's, this response of how do we manage AI in the systems, and then how do we give the skills to students, and that's how policy has kind of been responding. At the federal level, as with most things, usually the practical side of things kind of bubble up rather than come down, like some of the better ideas. But under the Biden administration, there was a document, again, sort of a framework that went over key issues. Just last month, President Trump signed 6 executive orders on education. One of them was about AI, again, training teachers and students, and it goes over a number of things. But I think in general, people are kind of starting to understand the moment. While there are concerns, people want to embrace it and become leaders in this space because it's not going away. So, yeah, I think that's their thoughts. I mean, other states, I can go into this as well if you'd like, but nationally, I think there is still a lot of work to be done, right? So different groups will track this data of what states are doing, CPRE or AI for education. And we did our own review. So I think it's pretty safe to say that like 27 states have something pretty solid as a state framework. So a little over half, but that means like about half don't have something really written. I'm sure more are coming, but in one of our research pieces, we actually looked at the timeline of how they came out, right? So it really started towards mid to end of 2023. A bunch came out in 2024. It's kind of trickling in 2025. But what's interesting is if you consider this against the backdrop of when ChatGPT hit, and there's other chatbots and other things like that, but for some reason that really just hit the news, and there was a ton of headlines about that. Then suddenly there was this felt need, like, okay, we got to respond to this, right? Students are going to use this. Do we want to ban it? Do we want to embrace it? Do we just need to set some guidelines around it? And again, that's usually the case for policy. But I think the nation is trying to move in a good direction.
That's one of the things I was going to ask, and then Caleb, I'd love to kind of see how you think this plays out practically speaking.
Yep.
But Christine, is anything concerning either on the federal level or in other states, or is it sort of so far it's mostly positive and optimistic?
What I think is positive so far is that the guidance seems to be broad. And I say that's positive because it has like a sense of humility about where we're at. Like the Utah guidance on the web page says this is a living document, right? So I think they're kind of aware that they don't know everything. They're aware that they don't know, right? And lots of times they're about these general principles, and I think they're just trying to understand it as they go. I think that trial and error, and again, some of these really innovative districts like Jordan, like they're going to have some takeaways that others won't have because they started in it, and that's useful as well. So while I tend to think that policy is just what it is, like I'm not sure that they're leading the charge and being the leaders on this topic. I think it's positive that they're giving some guidance. I will say there was an Ed Week poll, and this was about a year after ChatGPT came out, and like 80% almost of teachers said they didn't have something to look to or guidance, right? And they're looking for that. So that's the other piece. You don't want to leave people completely blinded as they're trying to, in real time, deal with it.
Caleb, to me, that sounds kind of cause for optimism as far as kind of where the country and the states are headed on this issue. And I guess my instinct to this would be, if speaking to policymakers, would be, don't freak out, don't rush to overregulate. Let's let the private sector lead on this. Is that right? And is there anything that you've seen happen in kind of the policy or regulatory landscape that is concerning or the wrong approach? Or, as Christine mentioned, since a lot of these are sort of frameworks that sound like they're optimistically saying, here's the right way to use AI rather than fear-based. What's your kind of sense of how everything's going in that direction?
I think there has to be a partnership on this one. I think it's very nuanced. I think we're seeing this scenario usually in education and education policy and innovation. You're talking about a time horizon of years to decades for things to really roll out, right? We don't have that luxury with this, right? ChatGPT came out, and within 8 weeks, millions of students were using it to do things that most people would call cheating. I was actually working with a group of about 200 high schoolers when ChatGPT came out. We showed it to them, and ChatGPT was released late November. By the time we hit Christmas and New Year, one of those students had won $20,000 in scholarships using ChatGPT to write his essays for him. And so the conversation then in the entire education space was, this is only going to get used for cheating and we should ban it. New York City Public Schools banned ChatGPT. Almost every school in the state of Utah blocked ChatGPT. We started blocking things like Canva, which is a graphic design tool that people use because it had an AI feature. Like that's how big the permission blocking stance was. I think we're going to see a very consolidated progression through 5 stages. It starts with permission, then it goes into productivity, right? Once we've kind of broken out like, hey, it's here, we have to be able to use this. You start talking about productivity. How are teachers going to use this? How can school leaders use this to get more done or do more of the right things or do better things? That next question is around student literacy. Students have to know how to use AI to compete for colleges and to compete for jobs. I already find it very hard to hire someone today that is not using AI multiple times a day as a superpower. So AI literacy is like that's what the executive order was about AI readiness, AI ready schools, AI ready students, and so we released an AI readiness program free for schools to come in, use SchoolAI to teach your students how to use AI. The next 2 steps are the most interesting ones, though. You get into how do you change learning for students, like student learning. That is going to change. What happens when every kid has an AI tutor in their pocket? You start talking about, in the way that at least for me, Wikipedia came into existence, Google came into existence while I was in school. and I remember a before and an after. There's definitely going to be a before and an after with AI from how do I learn things? Every piece of learning research that has ever been published suggests the more personalized you can make it and the more to my interests and to where I'm at, the better I'm going to learn. So that is going to be very interesting next step. The next one is how do you use AI to make schools better, right? Not just for the students and the learning, but actually as a like institution that we all rely on and send our kids to, or that everyone around us sends their kids to. Like, how do you make that a better performing institution for all of us? And that those latter three steps are where we get the most excited. We want to do that in the right way. We want to do that in the responsible way. We also think there's going to be, this is a new category of spending. Schools don't have money set aside for AI tutors for every student. So there's going to have to be some type, not regulation, but there is going to have to be a partnership with government and policymakers to say, this matters. I will say about Utah, I was just at one of the big ed tech conferences, like the big ed industry conference. Utah, bar none, is leading the way in the country. Multiple times, Matt Winters, the AI specialist at the Utah Board of Education or State Office of Education, multiple times was shouted out for his leadership. Sid Dixon, multiple times shouted out for her leadership. Utah is leading the way on AI in many ways, but especially in education. And so I would point to how Utah has approached partnership with private industry, but also frameworks, and also thinking about the policy, and also being the first state in the country to do like a statewide purchasing a vehicle for AI in schools and making that accessible to schools. And a lot of that is at this point, almost 80% of students in the state of Utah have access to AI at school through partnerships that the state districts across the state have done with us. And so Utah is already leading the way on, they're not banning it. They're using it for productivity for teachers. They're also now getting into the student literacy piece. And we think in the next year or so, we're going to start giving every kid an AI tutor in their pocket. And that opportunity for the feedback loops between students, teachers, parents, families, school leaders, eventually policymakers gets really powerful.
It's amazing to hear that level of depth that we've already achieved as a state on this issue. And one of the things I want to ask you, Caleb, is really, what is the right balance? Because when you kind of told those initial stories of, within weeks of ChatGPT becoming a thing, the students were using it to cheat, and then now, we have this, still evolving and growing. As Christine said, it's a living document. But what sounds like a pretty, relatively speaking, well-established framework for how to use it. So what is the balance? Where do you draw the lines between, here are the constructive and appropriate ways to use AI in education, here are the ways it would not be appropriate, and how do you sort of create form around those parameters?
It's complicated, like all policy and all of these types of things. But in some ways, I want to be very careful about how we are putting AI in students' hands. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, everybody that was using ChatGPT realized that ChatGPT was just really championing whatever the user was saying to it. Like it was sycophantic, and it was like, yes, you're brilliant, and if you go and look at the memes, they're hilarious. I won't repeat most of them here because I don't know the audience of taste for that. But just ChatGPT loved every user to an extreme degree, to an unhealthy degree, and you don't want to do that with a 12-year-old that doesn't know, right? Brain's still fully forming. They're still figuring out who they want to be in the world and how they show up to school, and dealing with a lot of personal introspection on what is the world, and you don't want to have put AI unproven things into kids' hands in irresponsible ways. So safe, managed, guardrailed, very important. But you also can't do the thing where you just ban it altogether. And there are countries that are doing that. There are states that are trying to do that. Or ban certain use cases, right? That make what we're doing at SchoolAI untenable. We do not do business in the European Union. And it's not because we don't want to, and it's not because there aren't kids there that deserve to have this. It's because the way that they've leapt ahead on making it impossible to do new things in some ways. Hard, like, and so yeah, there's complexity and nuance that along the whole spectrum there.
Christine, what's your take on, either from things you've written or just generally speaking, what do you recommend? What would be a good framework for kind of approaching this issue that maybe can address some concerns or questions that are out there, but also frame it as here's, again, the constructive, appropriate way to use AI to leverage, again, I keep coming back to this term, to supercharge our brains and supercharge our time management maybe as much as anything. But what would you propose, Christine, as kind of a rough framework that would be the right approach that policymakers, teachers, parents, students should have in mind?
Yeah. So, Sutherland has kind of written a very broad framework for this, but, we want to allow AI innovation to happen and then to be cautious about too many regulatory guidelines. We want to pursue collaboration and understanding. So these expertise, these partnerships that Caleb was talking about, and then seek best practices from those that are, learning this as well. But I think also in general, from a student learning perspective, a lot of questions do revolve around like the ethical uses, right? Like cheating and things like that. So it's like the obvious things. And you're talking about supercharge, but I've also heard the term augment what we already do. So we might not be okay with it writing an entire essay, but we might be okay with it, creating an outline and kind of helping the kids focus or something like that. We could be okay with, it being a research assistant, pulling links and kind of guiding in a direction where you could look at things. But the student still needs to be a critical thinker, a critical consumer. They're the decision maker. Like sometimes something will spit out a conclusion and you're like, I'm pretty sure that's not the right answer or not the right conclusion. So I now have the responsibility to go look into that and come to the conclusions I want to. From the teacher and leader perspective, I think maybe some of the issues are around like data privacy is a big one. Like how can we make sure that we're not stepping on some of these federal issues and things like that, or even just also an over reliance on tools rather than having that human connection. So I think in the vision that SchoolAI has is that this would augment the human interaction rather than take away from it. So those are the things. And always, and this is the point I would drive home, anything in education with all the different changes or bells and whistles, the point is student learning and student growth. So you have to ask yourself at any given point, like, is this going to facilitate the student learning or the student growth or somehow hinder it? So that's always a lens that I come back to in any sort of policy question that comes up.
I think there's an interesting opportunity here. There's a social institution that we haven't talked about yet in terms of research. It's not jump to regulation. It's also not free for all, give every kid everything, even though we don't know what it means for them yet. And so we've taken a very proactive approach to doing research with the people that you would guess, with the Anthropics of the world, with the OpenAIs of the world, with the University of Utah, with Stanford. Like we are very actively engaged in research around what works, what doesn't work, what are students interested in, what is the right thing to do with students at certain ages, when do you give access to the right types of AI and when do you not, and how do you keep people critically thinking and rather than just like taking and consuming. And there's a lot of intentionality here that we need to learn. We also need to learn very fast, right? We don't get to work on the typical academic life cycle of a research project measured in years. We need to do it in some cases in weeks, or we're going to do the wrong thing. And so finding the right partnerships between these different people that are motivated by the technology, but want to do it in the right and responsible way and are excited about the use cases. I could spend way longer than we have to telling story after story about like students having magic moments using AI and like light bulb unlocks for them. But also we have to find the ways that the tool is going to be used for that. And so research is a critical component to this that policymakers can be involved in enabling.
Well, I want to end. We've got just a minute or two left, and maybe Caleb, just to end with you, for let's see if we can give some advice maybe
Sure.
for parents out there, for students, for teachers, for policymakers, for anyone who, again, has felt kind of the way I have in this space of, I get that AI is really important. It's going to make a big difference, in this case, in the world of education. And if someone wants to get good at AI, if they want to understand how to properly leverage it in the education world, where do they start?
I'll give 3 very tactical recommendations. First one is for the listeners, for anyone viewing, next time you would go and do a Google search, type perplexity.com instead. And Perplexity is just an AI search engine. And what it's going to do is when you just ask it a question, natural language, you don't have to think about like, oh, how does Google want me to type this? What Perplexity is going to do is it is going to generate multiple ways to search for an answer. And it is going to go and read the top results for it. It's going to skip the spammy stuff, and it's going to read the top results. And then it's going to use AI to summarize those results in an answer to you. And so something that right now we think, oh, I have to go and search for like, what's the best vacuum to buy? How many like obnoxious links am I going to have to click through? It's like, just go and do it and say like, this is what I want out of a vacuum. And it will do the searching for you. So that's a very practical, just like get used to a way that AI is going to change how you do something very common today. The next thing is if you are a parent and you're working with a child, go to ChatGPT or Claude and just say, hey, I'm here working on something that my kid is interested in. How should we explore making paper airplanes? Or how should we explore dinosaurs? Or like whatever your kid is interested in, go and do that. I used to have ChatGPT tell my daughter stories using the spelling words that she was working on that week, and like capitalizing and adding emoji around those words, so she was used to seeing them over and over again. So that's step 2 is just ask ChatGPT, ask AI how you should work with it with your kid next to you. Last one. A parent can go and create an account on SchoolAI.com. There's a free account. Click on Spaces. Spaces are the word we use for these AI activities or tutors that teachers can create for their kids. Everyone at SchoolAI is using Spaces with their kids at home, even though it's primarily built for teachers today. Like I took that spelling example that I mentioned, and I now have a space that every week my daughter goes in, adds her spelling words, and she's now getting stories about what she's interested in, but that are using her spelling words and decorating them in special ways, so she's used to seeing them. If you are a parent where, I'll give a bonus one, and then sorry, we're over. If your kid is learning a language, most of these AI models can do up to 100 or more languages, and one of the most interesting use cases that Jordan School District did, they have a school, they speak 24 different languages at that school. The students speak 24 different languages at that school. They created a specific AI tutor that was responding in the student's native language and in English. And so they could start learning the 2 languages side by side, but also they could get help without raising their hand and interrupting class 20 times per class period. So that's more of a niche recommendation, but if there's a language that is being learned, going in and asking to do a thing in that language is really powerful as well.
That's amazing. I wrote those down. That's incredibly helpful. Christine will give you the final word. Any concluding thoughts, where folks really interested in this space of AI in education, in whatever way they're approaching the issue, what's the right first step? Where should folks start?
Yeah, I liked those recommendations. And one I was going to say is similar. Like if you have no idea what this really is and what it means, go and try it. I think that's, again, where you see the great potential, but also the limitations of it, which can maybe like ease some of the like fear mongering that comes with this discussion a little bit. But there was also, I was listening to an event from the Stanford School of Education. They were talking about this, and they explained it really well. It just has stuck with me, which is like some people fear that AI will replace certain professionals. We can get a discussion about maybe that's true in some areas or not. But basically it said, radiologists are not going to be replaced by AI, but radiologists who use AI will replace those who don't. And that for me was kind of a clarifying thought process about how to approach how we think about teaching students. Like, how do you want to set up the next generation to engage in a world where that would be true? So I think in that way, that also kind of inspires a willingness to look at it and to dive in. And so I would encourage people to kind of consider that perspective as well.
That actually ties in, both of your comments ties in really well. Again, an earlier episode with Brent Terrell on AI in the workforce, I asked him that same question of, hey, if I get that it's really important, but I don't know where to start, what do I do? He said, he's like, just ask AI. And so in this context, it would be if you're a parent, a teacher, a policymaker, go in and whatever your favorite chatbot is. I've been using ChatGPT lately to kind of test it out and get to know it. But just ask, hey, I'm a parent of, a 6-year-old boy who loves dinosaurs and space, and I want to help, him learn these things at home. How can I use AI to help me do that? Or I'm a teacher, help me. Or I'm a policymaker, help me understand the landscape. It's a little bit odd or meta almost of just ask AI how AI can help you in whatever sphere. And it's really pretty interesting. So it's an exciting field. Well, Caleb Hicks with SchoolAI and Christine Cooke Fairbanks, of course, with us here at Sutherland. Thank you both. It's been an excellent conversation. We really appreciate your time and expertise.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We're going to take one quick final break before we leave you with some final talking points. This is Defending Ideas. Stick around.
Sometimes it's hard to keep up with the latest policy debate that affects your life. The solution? Subscribe to Sutherland Institute's weekly newsletter, where you'll find in-depth insights from seasoned policy experts, compelling multimedia, and advance notice of special events. Visit sutherlandinstitute.org.
Welcome back. If you're anything like me, you recognize that AI is really important because it's likely going to be one of the most transformative technologies of our lifetime. But that can also feel a little bit overwhelming. So if you want to really understand how to leverage AI in an education context, here's an idea: just ask. Try out an AI chatbot tool. Start by describing your role, whether you're a parent, teacher, administrator, or even a policymaker. Then describe what you want to try and accomplish and ask for AI's advice on how to do that. For example, you could say something like, I'm a parent of young boys who love space. Help me think of fun educational activities I can do with them that are space themed. This approach can be helpful across a wide variety of roles, so play around with it and let me know what you think. That's it for this episode of Defending Ideas. If you enjoyed this discussion, please visit defendingideas.org, where you can access previous episodes and watch or listen on your favorite platform. Don't forget to subscribe to Defending Ideas on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you like to get your shows. And please share this episode on your own social media profiles or with a friend, family member, or coworker who may find it interesting. And lastly, if you want to support the broad work of Sutherland Institute, if you want more conversations like this, please make a contribution at sutherlandinstitute.org/donate. Thanks again for joining us on Defending Ideas from the Sutherland Institute in Salt Lake City. I'm Nic Dunn. We'll see you next time.